I've always had a hard time trying to express myself, and I think it's mainly because I'm a very introverted and quiet person. Obviously, I'm creating content for an audience, right? Doing photography, I'm creating videos, but outside of actually creating content, I just tend to stick mainly to myself and do my own thing. I don't feel like I need constant noise or company. I'm fine just sort of living in my own world. Maybe too fine. Most people get restless when they're alone, right? They feel like they need to be surrounded by other people. But for me, that's when I start to feel like myself. Those long quiet stretches when it's just me and my thoughts are where I do some of my best creative work. I almost feel like it's needed actually for me. I feel like I need those long periods of isolation where I can just sort of sit away in my cave and, focus on my craft, which is why I gravitated towards photography and videography, because making videos, taking photos, it's a very solo craft. I've learned that I don't just handle being alone, I'm sort of drawn to it. Maybe that's not normal, maybe that's a little dangerous. Most people fear the silence, right? Those in-between moments where nothing is happening. But for me, I tend to sink into it until I can't tell if I'm building something or I'm disappearing into it. Being like this has made it hard to figure out exactly where my place is and where I fit in the world. It makes it difficult to figure out a path that I could take for someone with my personality type. Building photography and videography into something meaningful was always the goal, right? But it actually came with a lot more challenges than I originally thought. I don't think that when I started this whole creative business journey that I realized how much work it would truly take to create something meaningful in photography and videography. Something that has a meaningful impact on the audience. When I got into photography and videography, it was sort of a way for me to be able to express myself, right? To show the world the way that I see it, right? My vision. And at the start of my journey, that's what it was, right? Because obviously it started as a hobby before it turned into a career. I lived for those moments in the early days, when it was just me, my camera, and my own creative vision to show how I see the world. But before discovering photography, while I was growing up, there was a lot of times that I felt completely disconnected to the people around me. Sort of like I was searching for something, but I just couldn't seem to find it. One of those moments where I felt completely disconnected was when I was in high school. I remember there was classes that I was forced to take that I just had absolutely no interest in what they were teaching. Not only that, but I remember looking around the classroom and feeling like I couldn't really connect with anyone around me. In Australia, people, they sort of often form their own little friendship groups, right? And they're closed off very much to new people. And I remember looking around at everyone in their own little friendship groups, talking amongst themselves while I felt alone. I'd strike up a conversation here and there, of course, talk with people in the class. But I remember sitting with this really uncomfortable feeling like I was in the completely wrong environment. I remember looking around one day confused as to why I was in this situation. I looked to the front of the class and just watched the teacher at the front trying to explain the task for the day, but it was almost as if they were speaking to nobody. Everyone in the class was just huddled around in their own small little groups, not paying attention, completely ignoring what the teacher was saying. The teacher was almost like talking to herself because nobody was listening, and the students were just having their own little conversations, gossiping. I felt displaced, alienated, as if I was completely cut off from the people in my environment. It was a strange feeling watching it all unfold, The teacher didn't really even seem to believe in what she was teaching. It was almost like she was just like reading some curriculum out word for word in order to try and get paid. The teacher just looked like a robot repeating daily actions, and the students were just completely ignoring, not learning anything. I remember being in this situation, just sitting there, looking around at people and confused, Like, why am I in this situation? Why am I sitting here alone, feeling disconnected at the back of some classroom, surrounded by people who don't seem to have any interest in being here? I just felt like I was in like the complete wrong environment, and for some reason, the people around me didn't seem to even want to question it. I felt a similar thing when I first entered the workforce, But this time I think it was slightly different. Instead of being surrounded by people that were just my age, now all of a sudden I'm surrounded by people from all different ages and all different walks of life. The workforce sort of has a weird effect on you, like when you first enter it. It completely changes the demographic of people that you're hanging around. No longer are you just hanging around people that are your age like you have for your whole life, right, when you were at school. But now all of a sudden you're hanging around people of all different ages and from all different walks of life, right? Some of the people you're around are in their 30s and 40s and have worked at the same company for the past 10 years. Some of them have kids, a family, they're married. Some of them are single. Some of them are young like you. Some of them have bought a house and are trapped inside a home loan they never pay off. The one thing everyone does have in common at any typical job is that they're all there working a job that they don't necessarily enjoy just because they want to get paid. It was slightly different to high school, of course, but doing something that the masses were doing, working a typical job, it felt like very much a repeat of what I went through in school, except only with slightly minor differences. Large businesses are essentially just hiring people in roles to turn over profit. Most of the people that companies are hiring, they seem to have a lack of passion for what they're doing, They act like they're just going through the motions every single day in order to get paid. When I was working 9 to 5 jobs, it was this feeling of being trapped that made me feel like a stranger in my own life. But as soon as I picked up a camera and started doing photography, I had this complete opposite feeling. It felt liberating. I felt a feeling of freedom. I felt an opportunity to pick up my camera and express how I felt through my own lens without being limited by other people. Photography came with this feeling where all of a sudden my ideas were accepted by the world rather than shut down as they were in my jobs. After doing photography for a few months, I felt like this is the opportunity that felt fitting for me to chase after long term. I knew that photography and making videos was my way of getting my freedom back, which is why I felt so compelled to make this my career. I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I know that feeling of freedom is what I wanted to experience forever. But that freedom comes at a cost, of course, right? I couldn't continue to keep working these dead-end day jobs because then I'd just spend all day feeling trapped. If I continued working like a typical job, then I'd just be waiting for the next opportunity that I could go out and use my camera. For some people, they just love keeping it as a hobby, right? But for me, I knew that I couldn't treat it as just like a hobby or a side hustle. I knew that it required my full attention and focus. That's just an important thing that I've learned about myself, is that when I find something that I like, I need to go all in on it, even though I know that there's a lot of hard work and challenges that are going to come along the way. So once I'd saved up enough money and bought myself a few months of time, that's exactly what I did. I decided to take this full time, and I spent the next 8 years of my life hustling and grinding 12 to 14 hour days every single day in order to try and make this photography business work. Now, when I actually started this journey, I don't think I truly realized how much work this was going to take. It came at the cost of so many different things. I didn't have time for relationships, that I would have liked to have maintained. I didn't have really any free time to sort of do what a lot of other people in my circle at the time were doing, going out and partying and traveling and getting to experience a lot of life. I decided that I needed to dedicate those years to actually building the photography and videography business so that hopefully down the line, where I'm at right now, I'll be able to have more freedom and do what I want and travel and experience life later. And it was incredibly challenging trying to build this photography career. There wasn't anyone that was telling me, oh, Justin, go this direction, go that way, turn this way, avoid this pitfall. I just had to figure it all out on my own, one day at a time. And along the way, there was so many mistakes that I made trying to make this work. But at some point, I ended up figuring out that real estate videography would be able to provide the consistency there that I needed in order to try and build this as a sustainable business. It was the type of product that I could repeatedly sell every single month to the same clients and build good relationships with those clients. That niche sort of allowed me to build more of a consistent income month to month, which allowed me enough stability to be able to sustain myself long term. So I decided to dedicate myself to that. I really niched down, and between 2020 to 2024, that was my entire focus, real estate videography. Of course, I spent so many years grinding out 12 to 14 hour days every single day, shooting and editing real estate videos in order to try and build my high-end portfolio. My time was split between building and managing client relationships, scheduling projects and traveling between locations, filming the videos on location, and then after that going home and spending all night editing. Those were my days. I didn't have time for anything else, if I'm keeping it real. But in the beginning, all that time that I spent dedicated to building my brand, building my personal brand, and building my business, to a certain extent, it all sort of felt pointless. In the moment, it actually felt like I was getting nowhere. I was running into so many setbacks and challenges along the way before I managed to make this work. But eventually, after years of struggle, it finally started to work. But it didn't pay off without pain and sacrifice, and I had to persevere through some of the biggest challenges in my career. Funny enough, when I actually broke through the noise for the first time with my personal brand on social media, it was just after I'd hit my breaking point. Like, I was completely exhausted. I was pretty much ready to just give up and quit on this entire thing. I'd pushed myself so hard for so many years that it didn't seem to work out for me. To the point where I almost gave up, if I'm being completely honest with you. I remember the day I hit breaking point like it was yesterday. It's so ingrained in my mind. I remember sitting at my desk on a Sunday. I'd just spent Monday to Friday shooting and editing my clients' videos. I'd spent Saturday filming 2 auction videos for my clients, and I was completely exhausted. I was scrambling trying to edit and pump out all of these client videos in time so that hopefully once those were done, I'd have enough time to be able to squeeze out a little bit of work just to start building my personal brand. Over the course of those weeks, in between those real estate video jobs, I'd spend extra time collecting and filming behind the scenes footage of me actually filming the properties in order to try and build my personal brand. The idea was to try and build my personal brand in the behind the scenes videography niche, and that required me, of course, to spend so much extra time at listings. Over the course of that week, at every single shoot that I did for my freelance work, I was spending extra time, 1 to 2 hours extra at each shoot to try and collect enough behind the scenes content to start building my personal brand in the videography niche. And over a few months of doing this, I developed a huge backlog of footage of behind the scenes clips that I could go ahead and use for my personal brand. But I remember that Sunday, I was just completely exhausted. I'd pushed myself to absolute breaking point. It's sort of hard to describe what it feels like to be like just mentally broken and feeling like you've failed after spending so many years of your life dedicated towards trying to build a business. But I remember at that moment, it just felt like soul crushing. It sort of felt like everything I'd done up until this point was just a complete waste of time. Because essentially, I'd taken a big risk, right? I'd dedicated all of my time outside of my freelance work to try and build this personal brand in the behind the scenes videography niche. And tomorrow, in my mind, I'd decided that I was done, I was about to give up on this entire journey and just change my direction completely. But before I tell you what happened, let me throw you back to 6 months prior to this. 6 months before this, I said to myself that I'm going to try and build a personal brand in the videography space. And my actual approach on how I was going to do that was I was going to film behind the scenes content at all of my freelance jobs. At this point, I was around 6 years into the business, and those prior years I'd spent refining and perfecting my skill set in videography. So after spending years practicing and refining my skills, I was finally happy with how my footage was looking, and I decided that, okay, now's the time that I'm ready to start showing people how I'm doing these jobs and to start showing them my techniques on shooting and editing. So I spent an additional 6 to 12 months working on this behind the scenes videography idea, whilst also trying to keep my freelance business running smoothly too. So while I was trying to run the freelance business and make sure that all my clients' videos were done and my clients were happy, I was also at the same time, trying to multitask and attempt to build my own personal brand alongside that. This required me to spend so much extra time at these listings to actually have enough time to be able to film all of the behind the scenes content that I needed for my own brand. And I was essentially doing this for no more pay, like I was building this but making no extra money while I was doing it. The goal was to hit 100k on Instagram on my personal brand account. It was an ambitious goal, of course, to try and achieve that solo without any additional help, especially when I was already shooting all of these freelance jobs and they were taking up my entire week already. But I didn't have another videographer that I could afford to hire at the time, so I was pretty much stuck on my own trying to accomplish all of this myself. I had very little time during this period, and I think, truthfully, if I was wired a little bit different, maybe this whole thing wouldn't have happened. But because I'm wired the way I am, with the little remaining time that I had left out of my schedule, I was willing to sacrifice it in order to try and make this work. It was a huge risk, and I was also losing money every single month because I wasn't able to take on as much freelance work as I used to, because all of a sudden now I'm spending an extra 1 to 2 hours at properties filming BTS content to try and build my own brand. So after I'd filmed the client's video, in order to maximize the results that I was getting at each listing, I'd go ahead and set up a second camera with a tripod, position that in a good frame, make sure that I'm in frame, I'm in focus, and I'm getting a nice clean shot. And then I'd repeat every single shot that I did for my clients' videos just to get the behind the scenes content for my own personal brand too. it was a very long process that I had to go through because I was repeating every single shot that I was doing at my listings. You know, no longer was it just like, okay, get to the job, get the shots that I need and get out of there. I was like, I need to focus on 2 or 3 big deliverables as well as getting behind the scenes content for my own personal brand too. Now, after somehow getting through all of the freelance business work from, you know, client acquisition, managing bookings, managing the relationships with the clients and making sure that they're happy, I'm also consistently becoming like a social media creator, you know, trying to pump out these behind the scenes reels, shoot and edit those for my own personal brand. It was exhausting to say the least, you know, after the first 3 months into consistently creating and posting behind the scenes reels every single day. For some reason, nothing seemed to catch any attention. You know, I was posting every single day for 3 months and nothing hit. I remember looking at like my most viewed video and it had 1,000 views on it and 19 likes. And I was like, that's literally the extent of the results that I was getting after 3 months of posting every single day. It was a tough pill to swallow at first because I was getting nowhere. You know, I wasn't making any progress. But rather than just give up like a lot of people do, I decided, you know what, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to make changes to my strategy. And so that's what I did. So the next 3 months, I decided to experiment a little bit more with new creative ideas and to see what I could come up with. So that at least, at the minimum, right, the people that were following my profile could at least get more value from my videos than they were before. Because a lot of the videos that I was creating in the early days, they were just behind the scenes clips of me filming the properties. You know, they weren't value or educational driven. Obviously now looking back, I know that that works a lot better than just doing the B-roll. But even still, at the 6-month mark of doing this every single day, I still wasn't really getting any traction on my videos. You know, people were definitely liking some of the videos that were shown to them, but it wasn't reaching any new people at this point. I remember getting to the 6-month point of this new endeavor and thinking, fuck, this whole thing is amounted to nothing. And I was scared, to be honest, because, you know, like I was afraid that I'd be going back to square one again. But after 6 months of doing it, I'd ended up building a nice backlog of videos. I had around 30 videos saved up that I hadn't posted, so that I thought to myself, okay, you know, I've bought myself a little bit of time here. Now that I've got some videos in the bank, I can focus on, you know, refining my content, and it can allow me a little bit of breathing room. I actually remember editing this one last reel at the 6-month mark after none of the previous content had gotten any attention, and I finished editing this reel and thought, you know what, fuck it, I'll just put this one out there. I thought that, oh, even if this reel doesn't get attention, then hopefully it will provide value to the small amount of people that do follow my account. And this reel that I created was called 5 Beginner Gimple Movements for Real Estate Videos. I was trying some new concepts, you know, experimenting with concepts that focus more on teaching and providing value to the audience rather than just showing, you know, the behind the scenes B-roll of me filming these luxury listings. As soon as this video was edited, I just posted it straight away to Instagram and, you know, didn't think anything of it. Then I switched off my phone, turned off my laptop and just sat there for a moment. I felt defeated. Honestly, I felt like all of this work that I put in for years on end has been for nothing. I remember it was 2 a.m. at this point, and mentally I'd just given up. After posting it, I was exhausted. I'd seen no progress in the past 6 months, and I didn't know what to think of the whole journey so far. I was at breaking point. Like, this was literally the day when it broke me. I just felt like it was time to give up on this whole personal brand thing. Like, it's just not working, right? So I went to sleep, and then after waking up that following morning, I'd completely forgotten about the video that I posted. I opened one eye, of course, when I was waking up and was like shuffling around my arm trying to find and dig around for my phone, and I grabbed it and I switched it on, and it was strange because when I switched on my phone, it was just like vibrating non-stop. I was just like, what the fuck's going on? Like, is my phone broken? And then notifications were just constantly popping up on my phone, one after the other, repeatedly, every second. New followers started pouring in, views on my videos started going up, and I actually checked the views on the video and it hit 10,000 views. And I was like, whoa, wait, 10,000 views? Like, Previously, the most views I'd gotten on a video was like 1,500, you know, like that doesn't make any sense. And then it occurred to me, oh, like I've finally broken through with something, like something has finally managed to work. And I saw a bunch of new people start pouring into my profile, start following my account and viewing my videos, and I just didn't expect it in that moment after doing this for so long and seeing no results. But then I refreshed the page and all of a sudden the video hit 12,000 views, and then I refreshed it again and it's 15,000, 20,000, then 25,000, then 50,000. For the first time in years, something has finally clicked. You know, I've finally broken through the noise on social media, and that library of videos that I'd spent for months before creating, that was finally worth it. Because when people ended up finding my account through this one reel that ended up taking off, all of a sudden these people would click on my profile and then go through and watch all of my other videos, and then all these views from this one video ended up just spilling down to all my other content too. And then it sort of hit me, it's like, okay, this is the moment that I've worked so hard for, you know, things are finally starting to work. So I quickly opened up my laptop and got that collection of the 30 reels that I'd saved up in my backlog and then just airdropped it to my phone. So one after the other, I just started scheduling and posting all of these reels every single day, because I knew that now my account has finally got attention, that I needed to double down and capitalize on this. Like, I was not going to let this opportunity slip away from me. And then after posting every day for the next 30 days, I just watched my account grow from 1,000 to 10,000. But weirdly enough, after hitting 10,000 on Insta, I didn't feel a sense of excitement. What I felt was a sense of relief, you know. It was sort of like a sense of relief that, okay, all of this work hasn't amounted to nothing. Because there have been so many times in the past where I tried different niches of photography and videography and failed to make it a living. You know, I'd spent so many different times in my life dedicating my all to something and just seeing it fail, and I hated that feeling. And finally seeing that this was starting to work, it gave me like a much needed boost of motivation, because for a long time I'd been walking down a path essentially with no clear light at the end of the tunnel. So seeing that something finally started to get attention and something finally clicked with an audience, it was sort of reassuring for me, because it was like, okay, now I can continue going down this path. So I continued going down this avenue, you know, shooting and editing videos for my clients, and then filming behind the scenes videography content in my spare time and building my personal brand. And over the next 2 years, so it's been 2 years that I've been doing the personal brand thing now, my account has finally grown to hit 100,000 followers. And now I'm finally put in a position where, as a videographer, now I have the leverage, right? I can choose the jobs that I want to take on. I can choose the brands that I want to work with. And as a result of building that brand, it got me the attention of a lot of big brands too. It also got me the attention of some commercial companies too. You know, now I shoot for professional athletes, I shoot for big brands like DJI, and it also pushed me into the game of a lot of luxury high-end networks too. And all of those years of actually building that personal brand, they finally felt like they were worth it. It was much more challenging to build a business than I originally thought it would be when I started photography, but it was also incredibly rewarding too. I think the thing I'm most proud about now looking back is that I was able to continue going when things weren't working. You know, I was able to bounce back and pivot and change my strategy so that I could finally see results in this industry. Now looking back and seeing how far I've come in the past few years, it's incredibly rewarding. You know, I'm proud that I was able to do that for myself. Looking back now at all of the work that it took and all the work that I put into this business, it sort of gives me, weirdly enough, a new perspective on people that choose comfort and stability. Like, I get it, dude. Like, I get it, because I've been through so much pain in order to try and grow this business. You know, people that choose to just work a normal job just to survive because they're scared, right? They're scared of failing. They're scared of going through the pain that someone like me had to go through in order to build this business. You know, this business will essentially break you before it makes you. It takes a very rare person to want to go down this path, you know, because when I went through it, I had to go through this very, very long, lonely chapter where I had to completely change the people I was surrounded by. I had to essentially change everything about my life. I didn't have enough time for, you know, to do fun shit and to date and have, you know, normal relationships. it also took a lot of mental willpower to be able to ignore all of the noise from the people around me. You know, the people around me at the time were telling me, oh, this is too risky. What's the point? What are you doing? Why don't you just get a job like everybody else is doing? They tell me it's not going to work. Those people I used to work, you know, minimum wage jobs alongside back in the day who told me, just do your job. I get it now, you know. It was difficult to shut out all of that noise and just focus on my vision, you know. Even now, while I'm like talking through this video, you know, there's new things that I want to go after. You know, I'm on another path that's no longer clear. I can't exactly see where this path is going to lead down. I'm sort of swimming in the sea of the unknown, you know. Like, I'm not really sure if these videos that I'm creating will ever amount to anything, but that's not what's important. I think what's important to me is creating these videos and spending the time reflecting on my past experience and sitting and thinking about the journey so far. So if you're at the point now where I was at, where, you know, you're also going through it, then hopefully these videos can help you too. I think this video is also partly a message for myself to look back on in the future, you know, to essentially say to myself that, hey, like, you're capable of doing this. You've done it before. When everybody was telling me that it's too risky or I should just get a job or, you know, it's not possible, this is a message to me that I made it work regardless of all of that outside noise. All of that doubt is just other people projecting their limited thoughts onto you. You know, safe people are some of the most dangerous people to be around because they don't want to see you win. They don't want you to stand out. They want you to fit in. Because if you actually become an exceptional person, it'll make them realize that their own limiting beliefs for themselves have caused them to live a life of misery. Self-doubt is a normal part of life, right? I go through it every single day, and I've always had a hard time trying to express myself, but that's because I think differently to most people. Being a photographer and videographer, it's an incredibly rewarding career, but it's one that most people would just never understand. It requires so much work and sacrifice, and most people truthfully just aren't capable of doing it. But I figured out a way to make it work, and you can too. Perhaps you're at a point where I was at, where you're looking at taking a big risk and setting out on a new path. I think that's the reason why you're watching this video, you know, and I'm not here to sell you a dream, right? I'm here to tell you the harsh reality of things. The truth is, it's just not going to be easy. You're going to spend years of your life failing over and over again, making mistakes and going through a lot of pain in order to try and build this business. You're going to have everybody around you telling you that it's completely irrational or it's too risky or you need to play it safe, but just know that it's possible despite what everybody else is telling you. Even after putting in all of that work over the years, I couldn't ignore the fact that the industry that I was trying to succeed in, social media and content creation, is way more dystopian than I originally thought.